Okay, we're live.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 International Leadership Conference, Session 7. This session is the International Association of Academicians for Peace, Session 7 of 10 sessions over these 3 days, April 28th to 30th. The theme of this session is the Academy's role in bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula. Good afternoon, buenas tardes, boa tarde, bon après-midi. My name is Robert Duffy and I'll serve as your moderator for this session. If you need interpretation, please go to the bottom of your screen and find the symbol of the world, the interpretation symbol. We have English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French interpretation for this session. Also, if you have any questions for the panelists, please type them into the chat box. We'll get to your questions at the end of the presentations if there's time. We're fortunate to have a distinguished slate of panelists today. In the interest of time, I'd like to proceed directly to the presentations. Details of each speaker's bio will be found in the chat box as each speaker begins. So first, I'd like to invite Dr. Dangu David Kim, Regional President of the Family Federation of South America, our affiliate organization, to share his greetings to members of this session. Dr. Kim, the floor is yours, sir.
Your Excellencies, honorable leaders, and ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and the privilege to welcome you in the session of International Association of Academicians for Peace, IAAP, as a part of ILC 2021, under the subject of the Academy's role in bringing peace to Korean Peninsula. We have been having difficult time worldwide for more than 1 year due to the corona pandemic. I think it is important to find the role of academia at this time and for the future, because academia can take a certain role to build a new relationship under the time of unpact. Everyone wants to live in the peaceful family, society, and the world. We need to find out the guideline for human beings to seek a peaceful world after pandemic. The world may need to see a simple nation to build peace from struggle so human can find a way for the world peace. In this sense, it is important to get involved in the current Korean Peninsula situation. If we are able to do something to create a reunification and peace in the South and North Korea as academia, we might have a vision and dream for the peace of all humanity. I sincerely thank all of panelists in this session to discuss this subject. And I hope everyone has a chance to find hope and possibility to the peaceful world through the works of International Leadership Conference. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your greetings, your warm greetings. Thanks so much for being with us at this early hour in Korea where you are. I would like now to invite, at this time, Dr. Tom Sullivan to open the program with his presentation. Dr. Sullivan is International Coordinator of the IAAP and President of Sunhak UP Graduate University near Seoul, Korea. He also is sacrificing his sleep to be with us today, so we're very grateful to him. Dr. Sullivan has been working on the development of a theoretical basis for the peaceful reunification of the Koreas, I believe. So it's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Tom Sullivan to the podium. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Duffy. Let me first offer greetings to our respected UPF leaders, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, who are participating together in this important ILC webinar series. It is my pleasure and honor to share a few words about core concepts for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Excuse me, let me see if the slides will come up. There we are. So in order to do that, I want to first turn to the principles of heavenly society that UPF is promoting all over the world, namely interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. In Korean, gongseng, gongyong, and gongwi. We can see from the Korean that the three principles are clearly related by the concept of mutuality, gong, and I've put the Chinese character here. These principles can be the basis for a vision of reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. As we will see, this mutuality is not only among people horizontally, but includes a heavenly dimension as well. In order to advance this discussion of these three principles, I want to turn to a set of guidelines that the UPF founders, Dr. Samyang Moon and Dr. Hak Cha-han Moon, have given particularly to the various schools which they have founded around the world. And these are love heaven, love people, and love the nation. Indeed, these three are guidelines not only for schools, but for the whole society and for all of us. Let me describe these a bit further, one by one. First, love heaven. Love heaven is the spirit of loving God, the source on which we are all sustained. To love and honor God, the true parent of humankind. Loving heaven is also following one's own conscience, which is the presence of heaven within each person's heart and mind. This vision, in the Korean context, is fed by deep springs of indigenous spirituality, Confucian humane concern, Buddhist compassion, and Christian devotion. The point is that the highest value belongs not to the state, not to ideology, not even to the people, but to the source, we can say, to the Creator. In this slide, over on the right-hand side, we can see the typical map of Korea today, sharply divided between North and South, two different regimes that are antagonistic to one another. On the left, however, is another map which represents the long, unified history of the religious and cultural tradition of Korea. We can identify four specific aspects of that tradition, which link together both South and North. First is the indigenous spiritual traditions, going back perhaps 5,000 years to the founding of the Korean people. Second, we have the Confucian tradition, with its patterns of filial piety and respect for other human beings in society. Third, the Buddhist tradition, with its teachings of personal self-discipline and cultivation toward enlightenment. And then the Christian tradition, which is also strong in Korea. All of these four traditions are part of the foundation for peace on the Korean Peninsula, and each has a contribution to make. Loving heaven in these various ways, four ways, has been a part of Korean consciousness since antiquity. Korean people have long cherished the idea of loving heaven and considering heaven as the source of their conscience, seeking harmony and collaboration according to the principle of nature and of the cosmos. In the founding myth of Korea, there is also details in how to honor heaven. The second is love people. Love people is a realization of the philosophy of devotion to the welfare of humankind, Honggik Ingan. This is an ethics of humility, tolerance, embracing others while denying egoism. It has a fundamental concern first for others. The Honggik Ingan philosophy is attributed to the legendary founder of the Korean people, Dan-gun. This ancient tradition is still recognized in both the South and the North today. As here we see in the center of the slide, a mausoleum for Dangun in the area close to Pyongyang in North Korea. On the right-hand side, we have the summit meeting between Kim Jong-un of the north and Moon Jae-in of the south, taking place at Mount Baekdu, a volcano at the highest point of the Korean Peninsula, which is considered sacred to many Koreans, both south and north. According to legend, it's the birthplace of Dangun, who we see on the left-hand side of the slide, who is the originator of the people and also of the principle of greatly benefiting humankind. The point is that these ancient traditions are still alive and can support peace building on the Korean Peninsula today. The third principle is love the nation. The spirit of loving one's own nation, but yet in a way that leads to realizing one world family of all of humankind. We can call it inclusive patriotism. To realize a peaceful community contributing to the welfare and prosperity of all people through exhibiting creativity and also personal responsibility. Loving the nation would include also dedication to the preservation and development of the natural environment, since the nation includes the land and other resources. So these are the three principles. Then, in terms of the practice, I think we can say that a pivotal starting point for the new future of Korea occurred at the personal summit between the founders of UPF, Dr. Sam Young-moon and Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, with Chairman Kim Il-sung of North Korea on December 6, 1991. IAAP is having special conferences in honor of the 30th anniversary of this event. The UPF founders came on the foundation of their great civil society work throughout the world, not only in Korea, but in many countries. With Hyojung toward heaven and on the foundation of their unity as a couple, Dr. Sam Young-moon and Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon risked their lives to practice the principles of love heaven, love people, love the nation, peacemaking in North Korea. And indeed, there were immediate fruits of that diplomacy, including Chairman Kim's pledge to implement reunions of dispersed families south and north, and also admission of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. There was also agreement on the promotion of inter-Korean economic projects and peaceful development, and as well, a driving momentum toward inter-Korean government summit talks. These pledges began to bear fruit immediately after this personal summit. So it was a highly successful event from many points of view. Now, since that time, things have been up and down on the Korean Peninsula, as we know well. But there are some insights from this personal summit that we can derive for peacemaking on the Korean Peninsula today. Here are a few of them. Representing love heaven. The cooperative devotion of many religious people and organizations is needed for the peace and reconciliation process on the Korean Peninsula. This is an open invitation to participate. Second, representing love people. The importance of brotherly attitudes and appropriate ritual forms as an element of all negotiations. Dr. Sam Young-moon approached Chairman Kim from the position of younger brother, treating him as a respected elder brother. And as a result, a new atmosphere could be created, wherein they could advance to a new level of relationship, other than being just adversaries. If both sides express their perspectives about how reconciliation can be achieved frankly, which they did at that time, then without accusations, a more solid footing for peace can be formed. Then, fourth, representing love the nation. We see that governments alone cannot achieve reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, no matter how hard they try, without the role of civil society in opening the way for peace. Only on the foundation of love heaven, love the people, can a new and inclusive patriotism of love the nation be developed. It was absolutely essential that the UPF founders came to the summit on the foundation of their civil society work. These principles, by the way, apply not only to the Korean Peninsula, but also to many issues we are facing in the Americas. Lastly, as Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon has noted, unification of the Korean Peninsula will not be brought about by solely through political negotiations or commercial trade. Unification should be based on the guidelines of love heaven, love people, love the nation, leading to a new society based on interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values, which can be an inspiration and model for the whole world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Well, thank you very, very much, Dr. Sullivan, for that very insightful set of remarks. I was particularly inspired by the principles of heavenly society, love heaven, love people, love nation, which can, of course, be applied to every single people in every single region of the world. The universality of this formula is refreshing and very much needed. So thank you very much for your contribution. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Thomas Ward to the podium. Excuse me. Dr. Ward is currently president of the Unification Theological Seminary in New York and former dean of the College of Public and International Affairs at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. His long and impressive curriculum vitae is shared in part in the chat box. His full bio reads like a short novel, so we won't put all of it in there. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Ward. The floor is yours, sir. Dr. Ward, you're muted, Dr. Ward. There you are.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, fellow speakers, UPF leaders, distinguished participants, and Dr. Sullivan, I'd like to thank you for your fine presentation. Part of me wishes that perhaps I could have gone before you because I think you dealt with a lot of the issues that I'm going to raise. So I really appreciate the way that you could contextualize things with your presentation. And I'm also going to be sharing from a PowerPoint, and I hope that this will be able to make things a bit clearer. It might surprise you that I'm a seminary president. I consider it the greatest privilege of my life. But I'm trained as a social scientist, and I've spent most of the past 40 years in that field. And so this particular presentation is more from the perspective of the social sciences and also from the perspective of analysis and resolution. What's the future of Korea? This is the big question. When we talk about the reunification of Korea, the question is, under the auspices and an alliance with what part of the world? Will it be with the free world, or will it be with the People's Republic of China? Which way is where things are headed for the future? Mainland China has emerged over the past 30 years as a major world power. And The Economist pointed out back in 2016 that somewhere in the next decade, or the latest by 2035, China military expenditures will exceed those of the United States. And by 2050, beyond any shadow of a doubt, China will be the major military power in the entire world. So when we talk about Korea, we can't forget China. And one of the big questions that we have to ask ourselves is, what is China's future? Will it be a future characterized by respect for the rule of law, or will it be a future characterized by the dictatorship of the party, by party rule? That's very, very important because that will have an impact upon everything else in terms of the future. In 1979, we know that at the time of the arrest of the Gang of Four following the death of Mao Zedong, there was tremendous hope that there would be democracy in in China at that time. Many people envisioned that and hoped for it. I had many opportunities beginning in 1984 to visit China. I met China's Foreign Minister, Chiang Kai-shek, on 2 separate occasions and met with many other Chinese officials over the years. And naturally, the question was, where is China going? And I have to say I was optimistic and I was rather naive about where China was going. I don't know how many of you have read this book by Michael Pillsbury called The 100-Year Marathon. It's a revealing text, a very important text for everyone to read, I believe, to understand the very complex circumstances and the lenses through which today's Chinese leadership looks at the world. Pillsbury describes himself for a long period of time as a panda hugger, and he speaks very fluent Mandarin, and he traveled very frequently with 8 different presidential administrations back and forth to China. And when he heard what was being said in the meeting rooms, when he saw what was being lectured and taught, he became very concerned because Americans were naively believing that China was heading towards democracy, and what he was hearing was something that was different and of concern for him. There have been significant developments in terms of modern Chinese history that we need to look at. And I want to share a personal experience. One of the most significant dimensions of the Chinese Cultural Revolution was a series of efforts, the belief that through tools it was possible to revolutionize people. And therefore, all over China, if you read about the Cultural Revolution, there was all kinds of praise about the Shanghai machine tool factory, which theoretically at least was in the process of, by having young people, instead of going to university, interface with tools, all kinds of inventions were developing in China. Now, when the Cultural Revolution collapsed, all of that fell apart. And I remember that when I visited China in 1988, I came across, if you see on that lathe there, it says SMTW. That means Shanghai Machine Tool Works in Shanghai. And I visited the factory. And I went in and as a researcher and as a person who knew a lot about the Shanghai Machine Tool Factory, I came in and I asked if I could speak to them about the Shanghai Machine Tool Factory and what had happened during the Cultural Revolution. And I was very quickly escorted back out of the building into the gates. So I realized that this was something that they really didn't want to talk about very much. We need to think about the future, however, in light of China's recent past. Under Deng Xiaoping, there were several secretary generals of the Communist Party who were pointing towards liberalism. Hu Yaobang, for example, who passed away in 1987, and probably most significantly Zhao Ziyang. And not that Zhao himself was not still a supporter of communism, but those who surrounded him, they were people who had been educated in the West. And they were basically saying, we have to toss this one-party system. We have to move in a different direction. And we know that all of that culminated in Tiananmen Square. And Zhao Ziyang went there to speak to the protesters at that time. And we know that for the rest of his life, he was basically a prisoner under house arrest. The Tiananmen crackdown occurred. Zhao Ziyang was replaced by Li Peng. And the 3 communist leaders who have followed since then have been rather hardline. Although there have been interventions and greater respect for rule of law, at the same time, there have been other things that have been deeply disturbing and causes for concern. Not just the arrest of human rights activists, but arrests of the lawyers who are defending the human rights activists. Is China moving towards rule of law? It doesn't look that way. And what is key to be able to make that happen is to identify certain key players there. Certainly one of those is those within political and civil society leadership in China who support such changes. And there is a real population with those types of interests, I can say from my own experience. And at the same time, the Chinese diaspora, the hope is that they can be able to also encourage China to move towards greater, at least respect for rule of law. But there are also key nations in that process. certainly Korea, Japan, the United States, India, our European allies, Australia, but most importantly, Korea, Japan, and the United States. And most importantly of all, I would say Japan and Korea and the relationship that exists between these two nations. They have matured as democracies and they have great economic and military power. If you look at the top 10 nations in terms of global firepower, Japan and South Korea both number amongst them, as well as the United States and China, and of course, India and Russia. Why does the military matter so much in dealing with China? Because there still is a respect for Mao and the calculus through which he looked at things. After all, it was Mao who said political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. And even Xi Jinping has said some very shocking things in a report that was submitted to and appeared in the Chinese People's Daily in October of 2013, where very specifically assessments are made about where and when and how a nuclear attack should be launched towards the United States, if that ever became necessary to do. So we are witnessing a process where there will be a change in military hegemony in the world from the US to China by around 2040. That's 19 years from now, not far away. And we have these two, I believe, the United States, Japan, and Korea, particularly these three nations, if they're connected together because of their shared democratic values, because of their respect for many of the principles that were presented here by Tom Sullivan, at least in the abstract. Because of those things, these three countries can do an awful lot. But there's an awful lot which is tearing these three countries apart nowadays, and particularly tearing Korea and Japan apart. There are real divisions between Japan and Korea. In a 2017 poll conducted by Japan's Genro Group, 56.1% of Koreans stated that they had a negative view of Japan, and 48.6% of Japanese have a negative view of Korea. And get this, in an August 2019 Statista poll, only 12% of South Koreans described themselves as having a positive view of Japan, and 77% indicated they had a negative view. And in 2019, the Japan Times reported that 45% of South Koreans would favor supporting North Korea should a conflict ever break out between Pyongyang and Japan. These are serious concerns. Countries which share democratic values, and yet this type of circumstances there. By the way, the first poll there is a Japan-based poll. What can help to address this gap that exists between Japan and Korea? How can there be reconciliation between Korea and Japan? Quite frankly, we know that things did not go well between Prime Minister Abe and President Moon. And things are not glowing either in terms of Prime Minister Suga and President Moon. So are there other roads to reconciliation? That first road there is what's known as track one diplomacy. And one of the key dimensions within conflict resolution of resolving problems is moving towards rightness, getting to the point, not where you solve the problems, but at least where people can begin to realize this conflict, it has to be solved by sitting down and talking, not talking at each other, but starting to talk with each other. We know how ping pong diplomacy opened rightness in terms of the US-China relationship. So is there anything like that that could be able to be helpful in terms of Japan-Korea relations? And I'm only talking about, is there something that can serve as a way to start a certain type of conversation? There are many different angles. And so I'm just going to propose one angle that maybe has not talked about so much, but which is an important angle, I think, to consider. And there are many other angles, and particularly those in civil society, we have to think about those angles. We know that for over 100 years, there was a bitter conflict between the Irish and the British, particularly over Northern Ireland. But in 2007, a very interesting article appeared in the New York Times. It said, Irish, Scots, and English, they are all one. They all have the same DNA. They're the same people, actually. And in 2012, the Kanagawa Prefecture University for Advanced Studies report talked about the genetics of the Japanese and the Koreans, and guess what? They're the same. They also are closely related to each other. So isn't one way in which perhaps we could begin to move toward ripeness is to look at those parallels and recognize that these are people that share a common DNA. The United States National Institutes of Health say the same. Koreans are more closely related to the Japanese and quite distant from the Chinese. But also, in terms of this track to diplomacy, there's all the work that's being done by UPF. We see Dr. Yang here, Dr. Walsh, Dr. Jenkins, and also many different efforts. For example, bringing together Japanese and Korean congressmen just to speak as people, not to sit down at a negotiating table, but to begin to speak as people. That's where ideas can be able to begin to flow. And also the Universal Peace Federation that we are all participating in during this ILC conference. Each of them are opening venues where there can be track to negotiation, discussion, if you will, that can lead to consequences. People will go back home, they'll write articles, they'll speak to governments, and there can be changes. The Universal Peace Federation work and what's happening during these 3 days can be very significant in terms of advancing, likewise, this whole cause of peace. And finally, there's track 3 diplomacy. That's people-to-people diplomacy. And I really want to emphasize that UPF has been doing very important work in the field of UPF diplomacy. One of the amazing things is the Women's Federation for World Peace, Bridge of Peace between Korean and Japanese women. Let's face it, since around 1990, actually 1990, 1991, this division began to occur between Korea and Japan over the so-called comfort women issue. And it was at that very time where Reverend Moon began to bring together, and Mrs. Moon as well, Dr. Moon, began to bring together Korean and Japanese women together to reconcile, to become friends, in order to be able to begin a process of discussion rather than simply division. And so much of this issue, which is a major divide today between Korea and Japan, is driven because of the lack of communication amongst women, first of all. So this effort was very, very important. It was a very important initiative that went on for several years, and I believe made an important foundation for conversation between Korea and Japan. Also, Reverend Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon have so strongly emphasized international marriage. And thousands, literally thousands, many thousands of Korean and Japanese men and women have wed together in order to be able to really open that type of discourse and exchange. Okay. And also American and Japanese. Here's a picture of Dr. Jenkins and Mrs. Jenkins. Likewise, the same thing, this whole process of a conversation, diplomacy on the level of the family, the experiences there, which can likewise have far-ranging implications on a broader scale. So these types of things are occurring in the midst of us through UPF and have been going on literally for decades and can contribute to this process. We need Korea-Japan reconciliation, and then Korea-Japan-US reconciliation and collaboration. And then we need to bring together other democratic forces in the world, really in order to support a Chinese move towards democratization, towards rule of law. And that is a very key underpinning in order to have a peaceful reunification of Korea based around the ideals that were drawn out for us by Dr. Sullivan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, for your excellent insights. A lot more discussion could be had on this topic, and I like your emphasis on the sort of predominance of the value clash that's coming between the Western democratic values and Chinese-based authoritarian values that you see coming in the next couple of decades, and where that might lead us. So, and some of the solutions that you noted that UPF is involved with through its founders, like international marriage, promoting international marriage, intercultural relations, the relationship between the Koreans and Japanese ethnically is very interesting too. So thank you very much for that. We now go back to Korea, where Dr. Eugene Lee, who has also lost sleep this evening, is joining us. And Dr. Lee is a visiting professor of international studies at the Graduate School of Governance at Sungkyung Kwan University in Seoul, Korea. Thank you very much for joining us today, sir. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would say good morning, right? Early morning here in Seoul. My cup of tea is helping me. So I think we're doing good. Thank you very much to all guests. And primarily, I should say my special thanks go to Robert for the invitation. So allow me to begin. From where I am, I see things slightly differently, and I see here academia playing a very special role in shaping the relationship between the North and South. And that influence has been quite diverse. So, and I will begin from my personal experience while being here in Korea and studying and teaching. So as an alumna of Yonsei University, let me introduce you a few individuals that I had personal honor to learn from. So, and my slides will be very simple. I would like to, and only few, but hopefully they will leave some impact on you. Just one second. Allow me to change to my slides, share the screen with you. I hope you can see them. So let me introduce you the individual number one, Mr.
They're not visible yet, Dr. Lee.
Am I? Okay, just one second.
You can choose which screen you want to show, I think, when you share.
All right. A little technical issue.
Perhaps we can get a young technician to come and help.
All right.
If you check the bottom of your
Internet.
screen, Dr. Lee, on the right side, you have a little share button, I believe. On the bottom, on your right side of your screen, I think it says share.
I can see
Everything
he's
has-
trying to share it.
Yeah. And Zoom is misbehaving. Okay.
Has happened. Have we lost? There we are. You're
Oh,
muted.
okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Perhaps you'll have to proceed without the slides, Dr. Lee.
I think it's a
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
matter of time.
We have it. We have it.
Battling with Zoom. Yes, it does happen. It does happen. Anyways, so let me begin, and I will start with introduction of few individuals. First of all, Mr. Number One, Moon Jong-in. He is a distinguished university professor of Yonsei. He is currently a special advisor to President Moon Jae-in in South Korea for foreign affairs and national security. He has served as an advisor to presidents like Kim Dae-jung and also Roh Moo-hyun. Now, this person is one of very important he has shaped the Sunshine Policy. And he is currently driving the overall foreign policy in, especially towards relationships, in the relationship between North and South. Now, this is person number one, and he's an academic. Here is another example, yet another teacher of mine, Professor Yi Zhongmin. He used to be a professor of Graduate School of International Studies. He used to work as a national security advisor, and he also been a member of National Security Council during previous presidencies like Ms. Park Geun-hye. And also now he is currently a senior fellow in the Asia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, let me introduce you yet another person. You may actually know him. You may have seen him recently on the television. He's also a former Yonsei professor, Che Jong-gon, currently serving as the first vice minister of foreign affairs. He's also a member of advisory board at Foreign Affairs Trade and Unification Committee at the National Assembly. Now, he also worked in many different fields in different areas. He is also a long-serving secretary to the President for Peace and Arms Control. So this is the third person that I would like to introduce you today. And here is my fourth individual I'd like to introduce you, Professor Hanso Ki, my dissertation advisor. Several years ago, at the request of the government, he has served in South Korean consulate in Shanghai as an attaché. So his field of research goes across China and North Korea relationships. So why am I telling you all of that? Why am I bringing all these people and introducing them to you? So let me stop sharing and get back to myself. The key reason to all of that, to show you exactly what my maybe very small experience can actually expose. I see it as very illustrious to what academicians can do, how that kind of number of small people can actually make a huge impact on what is going on here on the peninsula. Mm-hmm. Now, the current trend is that the central government here on the peninsula is and it's all relevant branches are constantly drawing from the pool of very often US educated, well-conversed in English academics. This is primarily the case for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also Ministry of Unification. Now, this is a very important trend that we need to catch upon. And the second trend that I see, of course, is the influence of research institutes, at least here in Korea, but also is from abroad, and some independent, some private and nonprofit, and some government affiliated think tanks. Together, they are increasingly becoming prime go-to destinations for data and new ideas for government policies. So in some cases, however, the academia also receives its own share of influence from other fields here on the peninsula. For example, military. Let's say Foreign Affairs Academy here, where all the diplomats are being educated. There are several academics currently teaching, but they are retired high-ranking officers or individuals transferred from military-affiliated institutions like Korea National Defense University or Korea Institute for Defense Analysis or alike. Well, often ideologically, they may be realists, and understandably, they may be seen as anti-North. This part of academia has its own, but also subtle, but still important influence on the government and makes its own impact on the politics and administrative system. Well, for example, famous Kaesong industrial complex on the border between the North and South, it has been a very important South-North cooperation venture that has been frozen since 2016. And despite all the effort by the current administration, Unfortunately, all that effort has been unsuccessful. And it's primarily because there are forces that are not allowing these things to proceed. So as we may see that academia still plays very much a big role into what's happening here. Academia is very much embedded in the government structures that shape and even guide narratives and processes related to the peace and issues of unification with North Korea. Well, strange as it may sound, but in my personal belief, identifying those key figures and working with them and inviting them to participate in the events like this, thank you once again for allowing me to be here, I believe can help immensely, and it may be so in several ways. So first of all, it will provide an opportunity to pass on new ideas and non-standard patterns of thinking that may enhance government ability to assess situations and design more effective ways of action. To put it simply, they can learn something new from all of you. Believe it or not, but at times they are starved of ideas as well. And probably next one would be the academia's participation in various international events that would provide outlets to promote new channels of sending new information towards the North in order to make a positive impact on the image of South Korea in the eyes of the North and also for the rest of the world. So my current criticism of the current government has always been the same. Unfortunately, the current government has been unable to effectively communicate in spite of having all these wonderful plans and great ideas for the peace. But all those ideas are somewhat hidden. They need to be spoken about or more widely. So here, in the conclusion of my brief speech, I would like to welcome all of us to work in that direction and build peace on the peninsula and the whole world. Well, thank you once again for your attention and for the opportunity to speak in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. This has been very, very helpful, I believe, in identifying a source of academics who, in your opinion, would certainly benefit from being exposed to an international body of academics with a variety of ideas that could, with whom they could brainstorm and get some fresh ideas and some new thoughts on how to fulfill their mandates on the Korean Peninsula. So very, very hopeful and helpful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Next, we come to Dr. Aldo Centurion Lopez, who was in Paraguay. Dr. Lopez is General Coordinator of Citizens of Mercosur, the South American Common Market that includes Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay. Bolivia is in ascendance. It's not yet been recognized, but thank you very much, Dr. Aldo, for being with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Bueno, muchas gracias a la UPF, también a Félix acá en Paraguay. Bueno, le estamos hablando desde el corazón de la América del Sur, un tema que a nosotros nos interesó y nos interesa, es la prosperidad de la región del Mercosur, es una región de paz y es la quinta potencia del mundo y por lo tanto aglutina aproximadamente 300 millones de personas. Y el tema que en esta conferencia voy a abordar son las oportunidades que tiene Paraguay en las cadenas de valor en la integración en el Mercosur. El Paraguay, hasta 1989, era una nación que estaba fuera del contexto internacional. A partir de 1991, que coincide de alguna manera con la fundación de la UPF, con la firma del Tratado de Asunción se inicia el proceso de integración que tiene 30 años. Acabamos de cumplir el 26 de marzo. Posteriormente, en 1995, el Paraguay forma parte de la Organización Mundial del Comercio. En el 2014 hace una apuesta importante y se aprueba el Plan de Paraguay 2030, donde se incorpora a la inserción internacional como una de las 3 prioridades del país. Durante 15 años del Mercosur, el Paraguay ha tenido una estrategia de ser un país ganador desde el punto de vista de las oportunidades, debido a que el Paraguay es un país de menor desarrollo relativo y un país mediterráneo, y por lo tanto ha tenido beneficios con respecto a tener una estrategia de ganador con ventajas. En el año 2006-2007, el Mercosur, a la manera de la Unión Europea, aprueba $1.000 millones para el Fondo de Convergencia Estructural, en los cuales el Paraguay ha aprobado 20 proyectos, desde salud hasta lo que son las rutas, lo que es vivienda, lo que es conexiones hidroeléctricas, que permitió tener una mayor visibilidad del Mercosur y por lo tanto también la ciudadanía pudo contar de alguna manera con los beneficios del Mercosur, que hasta ese momento eran muy reducidos. Y también la diplomacia paraguaya se puso las pilas en el sentido de tener una mayor participación. El Paraguay tiene a futuro 3 grandes desafíos. El primero es fortalecer su democracia. El segundo es de hacer a su economía competitiva. Y el tercero es aumentar ostensiblemente los indicadores sociales en términos de salud, educación, seguridad social. Somos uno de los países, junto con Bolivia, que tiene los peores indicadores sociales. En el Mercosur, la estrategia de Paraguay ha sido clara, la de profundizar y fortalecer el Mercosur, negociando como bloque y considerando al país con el estatus de menor desarrollo relativo y mediterráneo. En este 30 años que hemos cumplido, el Paraguay debería tener una posición, una propuesta y acciones mucho más proactivas y también en algunos casos disruptivas, de tal manera que en el año 2030 el mercado común del sur sea efectivo. Es decir, se cumpla el artículo 1 del Tratado de Asunción. Con los efectos de la pandemia, COVID-19, la necesidad de reactivación y crecimiento de los países del Mercosur, es necesario que los líderes sean innovadores y con urgencia puedan promover la integración de las cadenas de valor en el Mercosur. El Paraguay es un país con una vocación de integración. El 58% del total de exportaciones en el 2019 fueron al Mercosur. En cambio, el Mercosur tiene comercio de exportaciones entre los socios apenas del 11%. En cambio, la Unión Europea tiene un comercio entre los socios en el rango de 50 a 60%. Por lo tanto, hay un margen enorme para poder aprovecharlo y generar cadenas de valor integradoras. El Paraguay debe promover la integración de las cadenas en las cuales somos competitivos, como la cadena de la soja y la cadena de la carne. En esto voy a citar algunos. La agroindustria alimentaria, desde la miel de abeja, el arroz, el maíz, la piscicultura, la cadena del conocimiento tan importante, especialmente lo que estamos hablando. Conocer la historia, el presente y las posibilidades de futuro de lo que es Corea y Corea del Norte. La industria naval de Paraguay es la tercera potencia en términos de industria de hidrovía fluvial en el mundo después de China y Estados Unidos. Lo que significa el transporte en base a fuentes de energía renovables, en el cual Paraguay es uno de los dueños de una de las mayores hidroeléctricas del mundo. Y no solamente eso, tenemos desde bioeconomía, economía circular, tenemos el turismo. Estas cadenas de valor podrán tener las inversiones necesarias intra-Mercosur y también invitamos a los países extrazona, como por ejemplo Corea, con el cual estamos caminando en unas negociaciones y esperemos que pronto se pueda lograr el acuerdo Mercosur-Corea del Sur. El Paraguay, a partir del año 2023, a 50 años de la firma del Tratado de Itaipú, tiene que renegociar ese tratado. ¿Cómo pagará toda la deuda de la construcción de la hidroeléctrica? Quedarán disponibles 2.000 millones de dólares, 1.000 millones para Brasil y 1.000 millones de dólares para el Paraguay. Nunca el Paraguay ha tenido tantos fondos disponibles sin necesidad de un préstamo o donación que implica prácticamente 2.5 veces la inversión extranjera directa. Esos fondos permitirán el desarrollo de Paraguay y crecer en el rango entre el 4, 6 y 10%, como lo ha hecho Corea, como lo ha hecho Singapur, como lo ha hecho China y otros países asiáticos, utilizando los recursos naturales y humanos que ha tenido. Es una oportunidad muy grande para la República del Paraguay y esperamos que así lo entiendan los países del Mercosur y los países con que negociamos. En el 2022, el Paraguay asume la presidencia pro tempore del Mercosur y es ocasión para presentar como una de las prioridades la integración de las cadenas de valor del Paraguay en el Mercosur y del Mercosur en su conjunto. De esa manera podemos abrir las oportunidades a tanta gente que ha sido castigada con la pandemia. En el 2020, alrededor de 19 millones de personas están desempleadas en el Mercosur 5, incluyendo Argentina, Brasil, Paraguay, Uruguay y Venezuela, hoy suspendido. Desde mi punto de vista, hay una enorme oportunidad para hacer próspera esta región y desde esta región trabajar con Corea del Sur en lograr a futuro la reunificación de ambos países y que la paz se extienda a un mayor territorio en todo el mundo. Así que muchas gracias a los académicos y entiendo que la voz de los académicos es una voz que debe retumbar en todos lados de tal manera para que logremos esa tan ansiada paz entre Corea del Sur y Corea del Norte. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Aldo. Thank you very much for your stimulating remarks. I think there's a good parallel to be made with the Mercosur venture with a possible economic market, common market between the two Koreas I think there are obvious potentials to explore in that domain. So thank you very much for your remarks. Now we'll go to Argentina. We're running short of time, but we'll go to Argentina. We want to hear from Master Mercedes Giuffre, who's coordinator of the Korea group of the Argentine Council for International Relations and director of the Center for Studies of Korea, China, and Argentina. Master Giuffre, the floor is yours, madame.
Thank you. Mis agradecimientos a la UPF Internacional, en particular a la doctora Hak Jahan Moon y a Miguel Werner en Argentina, de la rama argentina de UPF. Quiero también felicitar a los expositores que me precedieron por sus excelentes disertaciones. Como académica argentina, realmente me siento muy honrada por participar en este encuentro. Quisiera que tuviéramos en cuenta que Argentina y la península coreana están separadas por más de 19.000 kilómetros. Estamos en los extremos del globo terráqueo, pero el sentimiento comunitario por la paz no conoce distancias. Los esfuerzos de la UPF para poner el foco internacional en la unificación de la península coreana son un medio valioso para resolver la amenaza a la seguridad de la península dividida y para la búsqueda permanente de la paz y la reconciliación, entendida la paz como una cualidad esencial que se debe ser la premisa básica en las relaciones internacionales y no solamente como ausencia de la guerra. La paz ha sido el tema más crucial de la existencia humana desde sus inicios. A lo largo de la historia, los seres humanos han aspirado continuamente a la paz mundial, pero ese sueño nunca se ha hecho realidad. La paz es, sin duda, el valor más elevado de nuestra época y se hace posible cuando reconocemos la existencia de otros pueblos, naciones y culturas, o sea, cuando no condenamos o apartamos, sino que buscamos el diálogo y los puntos en común con aquellos países que poseen otro sistema diverso del nuestro. Mi exposición parte del enfoque en la nueva etapa de las relaciones internacionales. Con el inicio de la era Biden en los Estados Unidos, Corea del Sur espera mejorar sus relaciones con ese país, a pesar de los continuos conflictos entre Estados Unidos y China debido a la cuestión norcoreana. Examinaré aquí brevemente la esperada política de la administración Biden en Asia y las opciones de Corea del Sur. El presidente Joe Biden y el primer ministro Yoshihide Suga mantuvieron el pasado viernes 16 de abril su primera cumbre presencial centrada en reforzar la alianza bilateral para lograr la desnuclearización de Corea del Norte y contrarrestar a China. Biden señaló a Corea del Norte y a China como las principales amenazas para la seguridad regional, enfatizando especialmente su determinación de cooperar con Japón para la paz y la estabilidad. El premier Suga, por su parte, afirmó que aboga por una desnuclearización completa de Corea del Norte, al tiempo de exhortar a un cabal cumplimiento de las sanciones impuestas por Naciones Unidas al régimen de Pyongyang. Ambos enfatizaron que para avanzar en asuntos relacionados con Corea del Norte y arraigar la paz en el Indo-Pacífico es indispensable la cooperación con Corea del Sur. Reiteraron así la importancia de la cooperación tripartita entre Seúl, Washington y Tokio, lo cual coloca al gobierno surcoreano en una posición difícil, incómoda, entre los Estados Unidos y China. La administración Biden combinará algunos aspectos de la estrategia Pivot to Asia y los de la administración Trump. Su política hacia el Asia creemos que se centrará principalmente en la estrategia de Estados Unidos hacia China. En primer lugar, parecería que la administración Biden mantendría tal vez una posición hostil hacia China, similar a la administración Trump. La estrategia de la administración Obama de contención estratégica hacia China no frenó la influencia de este país en la región. Por el contrario, China se volvió más asertiva en su ambición de extender su influencia, lo que desencadenó numerosos conflictos. En este sentido, la gestión Biden se supone que presionará a China construyendo coaliciones más concretas y eficaces con sus alianzas tradicionales, Japón, Corea y Australia, al mismo tiempo que busca nuevos socios en la región como la India y ASEAN. Se espera que también Biden negocie los esfuerzos por reconstruir la credibilidad y la solidaridad de la alianza entre Estados Unidos y Corea, especialmente en lo que respecta a la negociación del reparto de los costos militares. De acuerdo con las políticas esperadas de Biden sobre Asia y la implicancia en los problemas para Corea del Sur, este país debería considerar las siguientes opciones. Aplicar el multilateralismo para abordar la cuestión de Corea del Norte. Dado que un diálogo bilateral de Corea del Norte y Estados Unidos parece improbable por el momento, Corea del Sur debería utilizar el enfoque multilateral como fueron las conversaciones a 6 bandas para persuadir a Corea del Norte que vuelva a la mesa de negociaciones. La inclusión de China en este diálogo será vital, teniendo en cuenta la influencia económica china ahora que se ha concretado el tratado del RCEP, la Asociación Económica Integral Regional, y la persistente influencia china sobre Corea del Norte, quien está tratando de levantar las sanciones y prohibiciones internacionales. Así, el hábil uso de la influencia económica tendría más posibilidades de persuadir para la desnuclearización. Corea del Sur comprende los riesgos. Si las tensiones entre Estados Unidos y China se intensificaran, Corea del Norte puede aprovecharlas y capitalizarlas. Estados Unidos intenta reconstruir sus relaciones en la región con miras a contrarrestar la influencia de China, y a su vez Corea del Norte aumenta y despliega su arsenal nuclear. El presidente Moon, quien se reunirá con el presidente Biden en mayo en Washington, parece dispuesto a asumir una vez más el papel de mediador entre las dos partes. La propuesta surcoreana implica que Estados Unidos y Corea del Norte avancen en pasos graduales y por etapas hacia la desnuclearización, intercambiando concesiones e incentivos simultáneamente en el camino. Desde mi propio análisis, una Corea neutral y unificada, con garantías internacionales de los Estados Unidos, China, Rusia y Japón, podría ser la opción más aceptable para todos los interesados en una reunificación coreana pacífica. Este proceso debe llevarse a cabo gradualmente y la cooperación con países vecinos lo deben garantizar. Una Corea reunificada debería hacer una declaración de convivencia y cooperación con los países vecinos sobre la base del principio de respeto de la integridad territorial, la identidad y la soberanía. Pero hay negociadores estadounidenses y críticos conservadores de la oposición coreana que descartan tal estrategia, expresando que Corea del Norte no cedería mucho y quebrantaría las sanciones internacionales, que son la mejor herramienta de negociación que posee Washington contra Corea del Norte. Pero el gabinete surcoreano actual sostiene que el enfoque gradual es el más realista, aunque sea imperfecto. Corea del Norte nunca renunciaría a su arsenal en un acuerdo rápido para que su régimen no pierda su única moneda de negociación con Washington. La clave sería que Estados Unidos y Corea del Norte elaboren una hoja de ruta de confianza mutua por etapas. Por lo antedicho, la administración Biden creemos que debería optar por un enfoque gradual de las relaciones con Corea del Norte. Esto ofrece una mejor oportunidad para frenar esta amenaza y favorecer los intereses de Estados Unidos y sus aliados. El señor Biden dijo el mes pasado que estaba preparado para alguna forma de diplomacia con Corea del Norte, pero que tiene que estar condicionada al resultado final de la desnuclearización. Es más probable que la administración Biden esté a favor de un enfoque de desnuclearización a largo plazo y por etapas. Al igual que partidarios de insistir en una pronta y completa desnuclearización, el equipo del señor Biden también cree que Kim Jong-un no tiene intención de renunciar a su capacidad de disuasión nuclear y comparte la opinión de que hay que seguir ejerciendo una fuerte presión. Pero a diferencia de los partidarios del primer enfoque, los funcionarios de la administración ven poca o ninguna posibilidad de presionar a Corea del Norte para que se desnuclearice por completo, al menos en un futuro previsible. Y reconocen que la insistencia en una pronta y completa desnuclearización podría hacer perder a la oportunidad de poner límites a corto plazo a la creciente amenaza nuclear y de misiles norcoreanos. Si la administración Biden está dispuesta a adoptar un enfoque por fases, tendrá que decidir en consulta con otros estados interesados, en primer lugar Corea del Sur, Japón y por supuesto China y Rusia, su posición negociadora para un acuerdo de primera fase. En particular, tendrá que decidir las limitaciones nucleares y de misiles que pide a Corea del Norte que acepte y lo que está dispuesto a ofrecerle a cargo. Un enfoque inicial para un acuerdo de una primera fase debería incluir propuestas tales como la declaración de poner fin a la guerra de Corea, el inicio de las negociaciones sobre un tratado de paz permanente, el establecimiento de oficinas de enlace en Washington y Pyongyang, restricciones a las maniobras militares conjuntas en Estados Unidos, entre Estados Unidos y la República Popular Democrática de Corea, en consonancia con el mantenimiento de la preparación de los aliados, asistencia humanitaria, compromiso de no aplicar nuevas sanciones de Estados Unidos o de la ONU, excepciones a las sanciones para permitir que se lleven a cabo ciertos coreanos y suspensiones por tiempo limitado de algunas de las sanciones existentes de las Naciones Unidas. Insistimos en que la primera fase del acuerdo debería ser multilateral, aunque Estados Unidos y Corea del Norte serán los protagonistas principales y a menudo deberán dialogar directamente entre ellos. Los estados vecinos, especialmente Corea del Sur y Rusia, tienen grandes intereses mutuos en juego y deben desempeñar un papel fundamental, tanto en la negociación como en la aplicación de cualquier acuerdo que tenga como objetivo la reunificación de la península coreana. En el plano de la política de reunificación, y voy terminando, es muy difícil cambiar la esencia de las relaciones intercoreanas. De hecho, el aumento cuantitativo en términos de cambio y cooperación entre Corea del Norte y Corea del Sur no logró cambiar la naturaleza de las relaciones intercoreanas. La causa principal se encuentra en la perspectiva inmutable del norte sobre la reunificación. Sin embargo, si se observa la diferencia de poder y el estatus internacional de cada parte, es Corea del Sur quien debe hacer frente a esta situación y lograr promover cambios en Corea del Norte. La política de reunificación es una estrategia de desarrollo nacional. Es decir, es una estrategia para lograr, en última instancia, la reunificación mediante el establecimiento de una sólida base. En este sentido, la política de unificación que representa la fórmula de unificación nacional, de unificación comunitaria, debe mejorarse y desarrollarse más. El proceso de creación de confianza de la administración Moon revela esta necesidad. Los esfuerzos para establecer relaciones normales entre las dos Coreas y sentar bases para reunificación necesitan ser intensificados al evaluar críticamente la actitud de Corea del Norte hacia todas las políticas de unificación desde los años 90. Finalmente, creemos que una Corea reunificada y abierta al mundo debe ser un todo con raíces espirituales y humanistas que orienten hacia una identidad profunda. Esa identidad se reformulará mediante una decisión voluntaria de ambas partes y también del pasado histórico, religioso, cultural y antropológico que ambas Coreas comparten en un marco de solidaridad plurinacional, como dijo mi antecesor, expositor, el doctor Tom Sullivan. Como dice, y termino, el pensador italiano Riccardi, este mundo globalizado está atravesado por una densa red de vínculos e interdependencias. Al conocer, conciliar alteridad, conexiones, distancias y mestizajes, ejercemos aquel arte de la convivencia fruto del realismo político y de la esperanza humana y religiosa. Es el realismo ante un mundo plural. Es la esperanza de que no se repita la barbarización de la pluralidad en el conflicto. Es la realización de volver a una civilización formada por dos componentes que alguna vez fueron uno solo. Y quisiera terminar con un poema brevísimo de 3 líneas de la poetisa coreana Kim Nam-jo sobre la unificación de las dos Coreas, que a mí me pareció realmente un broche de oro para el tema de la reunificación. Y dice: el sur será como el norte será como el sur, el día que los dos colores de la bandera de Corea se unan y se forme el morado. 70 millones de ciudadanos se convertirán en uno y mirarán hacia el cielo con las manos juntas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Master Griffey. Thank you very much for your remarks. And we'll go directly to our final speaker now, who is Dr. Adrian Meza Souza, rector of the Paulo Freire University of Nicaragua in Managua. Dr. Souza, you have the floor, sir.
No podemos escucharlo, doctor. Usted tiene que abrir su micrófono, no está funcionando.
What do we got going here? We're having a little difficulty here with Dr. Souza's technical side. I see him there. Dr. Souza, can you hear us? There we are. Can someone...
Doctor, no puedo escuchar ahora.
Podemos escuchar usted ahora. Está funcionando.
If we're running quite late, if we're not able to get the technical side fixed, I think we're going to have to wind up this session. Shall we give it another minute? Yeah, okay. We're really running out of time, though. It's an hour and 20 minutes. I would ask if anyone wants to take a moment to answer the question, what areas of academic inquiry can academicians best focus on in the effort to soften the ground among the two Koreas and their neighbors toward a reconciliation on the peninsula. What areas of academic inquiry can academicians best focus on? Anyone want to care to take a stab at that? It's tough being a moderator.
I can say a comment if you like.
Great, thank you.
I think we have to focus on common humanity, which is what is behind the ideas of interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. I think that's, and several speakers have touched on that in various ways. But that's where we need not only the banner of common humanity, but we need to research deeply what we're actually talking about and how it relates to the respective culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I think we have the basis of another session at some later time with that. And I think there's lots more there, a lot to dig into here. So I think we'd better bring this session to a close. It looks like we've lost our dear Dr. Souza, and we hope we can get him on the next session and the next ILC or another occasion. Thank you very, very much, all participants, for your great efforts and your great contributions to this matter. And I know it's ongoing, and I hope we can call upon you again for your insights in a future forum. So thanks once again for joining us. Been a great session. Really do appreciate your being here with us today, and have a great rest of the day. Don't forget, there's another session tomorrow for the ILC program, so please do check in if you can. Thank you. God bless you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
One session, very top quality. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Congratulations.
Muchas gracias. Hasta pronto.
Thank you, everybody.
Muito
Thank
obrigado.
you.
Muchísimas gracias, sí, señora.
Lo siento mucho,
A bientôt,
doctora Diana.
j'espère.
Someone take a photo quick.
So one thing, Reverend Duffy,
Yes.
don't close the session yet.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of the technical, EJ or Eleazar, please do not turn it off yet, because if the Professor Souza gets it to work, we can record him right now.
Okay.
And it'll be there for, for the replay.
He's on, but he couldn't. There's no sound, Dr. Jenkins.
But let's talk to him. He had sound one time when he held that microphone up to his, voice.
Doctor Mesa, cuando usted estaba utilizando su micrófono allá, podíamos escucharlo. Quizás de nuevo.
¿Me escucha ahora?
Ahora sí, entendemos, escuchamos, sí, está funcionando.
No.
Sí, entendemos, sí, escuchamos, no hay problema.
¿Podemos o ya es muy
Is he
tarde?
coming back?
Yes.
Yeah, let's record it. Keep it recording, please. That's great. Just introduce him like
¿Podemos
Right.
hablar o ya es muy tarde?
Dr. Duffy.
Okay, Dr. Souza, please. We've introduced you, and we're hoping to hear from you. Would you please give your message? You have the floor, sir.
There he is.
Muchas gracias. Voy a
Oh,
ser muy
great.
breve.
Hey,
Gracias.
Voy a ser muy breve. Desde la perspectiva académica, debemos admitir que durante toda su historia los pueblos han enfrentado retos sociales, económicos y políticos que parecían invencibles. Desde el descubrimiento de nuevos continentes, viajes espaciales o las distintas batallas contra las pandemias y enfermedades que han azotado a la humanidad en diferentes momentos. Pero quizás uno de los retos más difíciles de los pueblos son los que se derivan de la búsqueda permanente de la paz, la convivencia y la armonía en el seno de nuestras comunidades y naciones. La batalla de las concepciones sobre cómo organizar la sociedad se ha traducido en no pocas veces en enormes tragedias con altos costos humanos y sociales. En esa batalla, la academia y los universitarios han sido en todo el mundo protagonistas y también víctimas. Por esta razón, y tomando en cuenta la historia del pueblo coreano, la posibilidad de la reunificación de Corea del Norte y Corea del Sur es una esperanzadora alternativa que se suma a los sueños que los hombres y mujeres de buena voluntad comparten en el mundo y a la que debemos de colaborar desde nuestras casas de estudio. Finalizando, los pueblos merecen la oportunidad de vivir juntos, compartiendo su origen, su historia, sus recursos y su geografía. En el siglo XXI es difícil tener que aceptar que una barrera de orden político o ideológico pueda ser más fuerte que el amor de una comunidad nacional que se sabe pertenecer a un mismo pasado y por ende también se reconoce como merecedora de un mismo futuro. Corea merece la oportunidad de ser una sola por todo lo que ello implica para el pueblo coreano, pero también para la misma humanidad. Esta visión desde la academia debe ser divulgada y difundida por todos los medios a nuestro alcance. Los caminos que deben ser recorridos para alcanzar una meta tan hermosa le corresponde decidirlo en última instancia al propio pueblo coreano y a sus respectivos dirigentes y gobiernos. Son ellos los que, armados de la sabiduría y la madurez de los pueblos de Oriente, pueden definir las alternativas más pragmáticas, realistas y justas para alcanzar un cometido de semejante trascendencia. Estamos seguros que más temprano que tarde, el pueblo unido de Corea una vez más sorprenderá al mundo con la esperanzadora noticia de su reunificación. Deseamos desde Nicaragua que el gran arquitecto del universo ilumine sus mentes y sus corazones para alcanzar una meta que no solamente será una victoria del pueblo coreano, sino también una luz de esperanza para toda la humanidad. Muchas gracias desde Nicaragua y ahí nos disculpan por los problemas técnicos que tuvimos.
Gracias, doctor Mesa. Muy lindo.
Así es.
Thank you so much, Dr. Souza. Thank you. We're so glad
Excellent.
for your presentation. It was very well worth the wait. Thank you again.
There's still 100 people on with the program, so it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. Thank you, everybody. This
Thank you. Gracias por venir.
of all, it was so well developed. Thank you.
Thank you, gracias.
Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you very much.
UPF.
And good night.
Thank you, Reverend Shem,
Yes.
and also Samau and Eleazar. Thank you to Canada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias todos.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you to Dr.
Obrigado.
and to Dr. Sullivan for taking time out of their away from their sleep to join.
Thank you, Dr. Ward and Dr. Sullivan. Excellent work. Yes.
Hope to meet you again.
So we really have an America's Korean linkage here. I think it's very impressive, actually, honestly speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Valuable session. I really appreciate everyone here. It's really been good.
Thanks for shepherding us, Reverend Duffy. Great job pushing
thank
us along these weeks. And Dr. Jenkins, thank you so much.
Yes.
Dr.
Thank you.
Sullivan,
Yeah.
Well,
Great
thank you
message.
for all the leadership in the Americas.
Dr. Lee, thanks for making it. It's
Yep.
Yes, Dr. Lee.
good morning for you.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Dr. Lee. Really,
Otra
likewise.
vez, doctor López y señora Briquet.
Oh,
Muchísimas gracias.
Senora Geoffrey, excellent, excellent.
Muy excelente, magistera.
Julian Lopez, gracias. Wonderful.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. It's great. I think it might be the best.
Realmente.
Thank you,
Ciao,
Dr.
ciao.
Kim. David Kim, thank you. This was the best session. I was so much in depth, really in depth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. To MC also, very nice.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. See you tomorrow.
Morning at 9
Adieu.
a.m.
Thank you all very much. God bless.
Bye-bye.